Hi, I'm Ben,
And I'm Josh.
and this is the Bad at Magic podcast, a podcast about games, life, and other things. And welcome to episode 34.
All right, so this is where I do the bad at numbers thing.
You got it.
I've got it. So this one I don't have a lot, but 34 is a fun number because it is a kind of almost a footnote in one of my favorite books, and that is The Count of Monte Cristo. So Edmond Dantes, who is the protagonist in that book, when he was sentenced wrongly to prison for life forever because some other guy wanted his girl, he was prisoner 34 at the Chateau d'If.
Okay.
And
Dude,
that's
a classic. That came out in 1844.
Did you just look that up?
Yeah.
Okay, good, because there's no way you can have that off the top of your head. Have you read The Count of Monte Cristo?
No, but Alicia recommends it highly. I got to put it on my list now. That's going in my Audible queue, people.
So this is I read that book in high school, and in high school, I very, very much appreciated that book because it is, the whole book is about Edmond Dantes absolutely perfectly, meticulously
planning his revenge.
And executing it flawlessly. And it just, when I was reading it as a teenager, it just felt so good. It's just like the karmic justice coming back to haunt these people. And then now looking back on it as a more mature person, I feel like, dude, let it go. It's been decades. You're filthy rich. Like, move on.
You know, that's a very profound transformation of your soul that you just described. Did you know that you had made that transformation from this young, hot-blooded male who reveled in someone else's fictional revenge to now somebody who's willing to forgive and forget?
Oh, okay. Forget, but never forgive. That's the important thing. No, I did know this, and we talked a little bit about this when we discussed my career in the Air Force and how it was spiraling downward because of decisions that I was making over here. Because I couldn't let things go, because I was very vengeful, because I was just so willing to draw that flaming sword of vengeance and like just slay all my perceived enemies. That is, I think, a younger and a much more naive view of the world. And I feel like I've matured a lot since then in the last probably 5 years.
That's good. Hey, that wasn't on your 5-year plan.
It was not on my 5-year plan, but it's good that me, as a middle-aged 30-something, finally grew up out of that like kid phase and like became a functioning, mature adult.
Good for you, man. Proud of you.
Oh, thanks, Ben.
Well, I needed a couple of those this week because 2 really bad things happened. I don't think I told you about either of these. So first go here. So a week ago Friday, it was the Friday before Black Friday, and I had bought plane tickets to fly home and spend 3 days with my family over the Thanksgiving holiday and then come back to Florida. It's 1,000 miles. It's like 2-hour flight. It was going to be relatively easy, but my pass is kind of tenuous. Well, on that Friday, there was a guy that was departing, and on Monday morning, we come into the office, and our leadership sends us a message that says, that guy that spent an hour standing next to your desk on Friday tested COVID positive over the weekend.
So you've been in quarantine then?
Well, I wasn't quarantined, but I had to make a serious decision about whether or not to expose my family and my sister's family that were going to be at my house for Thanksgiving. They're very certain and have maintained very close circles, and me, I'm probably the most unquarantined of all of them, had significant exposure to someone that was COVID positive.
It's not.
I'll
Come on,
downplay it a
Ben.
bit. We were both wearing masks. I didn't touch anything that he touched, but we were standing within 6 feet for dozens of minutes.
Come on, Ben. It's not like you're out there, chatting up random homeless people while you're out there deployed.
I was talking to a random homeless person today, and I ate out. So yes, all those things are true.
I'm being very facetious. Yes, you are the one with the whitest circle.
So, with great regret, I canceled my flight and spent Thanksgiving by myself in my hotel room in Florida.
Yeah, I knew, I had heard that your plans were to go home for Thanksgiving. And so when I texted you a picture of my perfectly smoked 8-hour applewood turkey.
It looked delicious.
And you texted me back a picture of your fried chicken, I felt probably 30% bad and 70% I thought it was hilarious.
Yeah. So what?
Sorry for you.
How did the smoked turkey turn out?
Oh, it's bellissima. It's wonderful. Thank you for asking.
Yes. What was your favorite thing you made this year?
Ooh, favorite thing I made this year. All the sides. Like, I'm just going to throw all the sides into the favorite thing because that's the best part of Thanksgiving. Yes, I love
You've
turkey.
said this last year. You do love all the Thanksgiving sides.
All the Thanksgiving sides are wonderful, and I'll tell you, we had one person, my brother-in-law, who lives here, and he's single, and he's been trying to isolate and quarantine, and he did. We're trying to keep our circles very small, and we're trying to be very, very tight about it. He went and got a COVID test a week before Thanksgiving, and then self-isolated the entire week.
Wow.
Just to because he understands that we're being very strict about these things, and he wanted to respect that. So it was very nice of him to do so. But we had him over for Thanksgiving. So there was 3 adults and 2 children, and I made probably 14 pounds of sweet potatoes and like a whole casserole dish of green bean casserole. Like, I still cooked as if 20 people were coming over, and it's
so
wonderful.
You have not run out of leftovers yet.
I'm going to be eating Thanksgiving dinner probably right up until Christmas.
Awesome. I have no leftovers whatsoever, but the only thing I really, really missed out on was the pie. That was the thing I felt like I really just didn't get that I could have got. And I could go out to the store and get a pie, but it just doesn't feel the same.
And you didn't get to see any of your family or the kids for Thanksgiving. That's the best part.
So that was very upsetting, and that's why I kind of brought it up. But something way worse than that happened this week, and I thought of that when you were talking about the end of your career in the Air Force. So on the same day that I canceled my flight, I was laying in my bed in frustration, but almost over it. And I went on Facebook, and I'm on a group that's my functional community in the Air Force. And there was an announcement from the assignments team in Texas. And they said, congratulations to everyone that got teaching jobs. We've finished all the assignments. Here's a list of people and where they're going.
Yes, okay.
This is what I've been waiting for, Josh.
Yeah, because I remember you took like major steps to try to get on that list of instructors.
Networked, I sent out resumes, I got my senior leader to give a strong endorsement. I did all of those things. And at the very last minute, a minor technicality came up and looked and threatened to ruin the whole thing. And I thought, no, it's going to work out in the end. Everything's going to be fine. Well, when I opened up this list on Facebook on Monday, I scrolled through the list, and they'd given the job I wanted to someone else, and I wasn't on it.
Oh, Ben, I'm sorry.
I was crushed. I laid there, and I felt like someone had just put a 1,000-pound weight on top of me. I had so far forgotten about canceling my Thanksgiving flight, I can't even tell you, because one weekend with my family, as opposed to 3 years of soul-sucking staff work at some major command headquarters for the rest of my career, the next 3 years flashed before my eyes, and I just I was crushed.
Well, I'm terribly sorry to hear that. I know you were very much looking forward to doing the teaching job. I have good news and bad news for you. Okay, so
Go.
Good news first. You get to go to this soul-sucking staff job with the full understanding that this is your last tour, and there's not really much they can do to you. So you get to be that old crusty guy that just blows everyone off and never answers emails and gets to be super unreliable. And everyone's like, well, what are we going to do?
I want that a little bit, and I've realized it already. Like, I finally passed all the milestones where I still have to pretend like I'm shooting for the sky still.
Oh, yeah, you're done. Like, everybody knows it.
Once I'm not trying to secure my last job, I'm not trying to secure a promotion, there's nothing else that I need to pretend to be nice about. But that doesn't mean I'm going to be retired on active duty. I still want to perform. I still want to be somebody they can count on, and I still want to make a difference. But I don't have to do any of those other things where I'm pretending like I care when I don't.
It's funny because you're going to put in probably 60 or 70% at this next job thinking that you're taking it easy. And that's going to be way outperforming most other people that would have been in that same job.
Unless they measure it by those extra things. Like, I've already seen it. Like, my boss said, hey, we had a security incident. I need someone to volunteer to do the investigation. And I wrote back right away and said, not me.
You shouldn't even, you can't nose goes in an email. You just go dark and quiet until he picks something.
No.
You can't distinguish yourself by saying no.
The last time he did something like this, he's like, you have to answer me. So I was just making sure he knew right away.
Haha, no.
It's like that old scene in cartoons where there's the one guy that's kind of clueless and the boss asks for a volunteer and everyone else in
Steps
simultaneously
back.
takes a step backwards. Yeah, that.
That's a good one. So that was the good news, is you get to be retired on active duty, or road, we called that back in the day. The bad news is that things like this come in threes.
What is that? Some kind of karma belief or something?
Oh, come on. You've heard of this. Things come in threes, like major,
yeah, but
terrible
why? Are
things.
You saying that the universe is conspiring against me?
No, I'm saying confirmation bias, and the people's irrational love of threes always groups things into these trifectas.
Well,
so
if I wasn't looking for it, I am now.
Exactly. So with this confirmation bias that I've objectively planted into your head, make sure you're on the lookout for the next terrible thing that's going to happen to you.
Well, in the next, probably before Christmas, I'm guessing they'll tell me where I actually am going. Here's my prediction. I think they're going that the nuclear experience on my record stands out like a sore thumb, and they're going to send me to Air Force Global Strike Command headquarters at Barksdale Air Force Base, Louisiana.
Ooh, Louisiana. No bueno. There's no chance you can get up to like NORAD or something up in Colorado again?
I applied for STRATCOM in Lincoln, Nebraska. There's one job as a liaison to the Army at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. There was one out in the East Coast. But if I'm a betting man, I'm thinking Global Strike Command in Louisiana.
Well, it could be worse. It could always be that weather station in Alaska or Antarctica or something.
Or they could send me to Cannon.
Oh, no. I would not wish that on my worst enemy. For our dear listeners, Cannon Air Force Base is in New Mexico, and it's in the worst part of New Mexico, smack in the middle of freaking nowhere. It is terrible there. The main export is some kind of dairy thing, so it's surrounded by dairy farms and smells bad all the time. It's just awful. Don't go.
I went and visited you there once, and I drove through cotton fields for 2 straight hours before I got to your house.
It's not a lovely place. It's not one of those quaint little towns that you go to like, oh, this is a hidden little gem. No, it's objectively terrible.
Something I never knew before I went there, though, is when they harvest cotton, it's very messy. Like, they don't get it all, and then it blows all over the place, and it's just like in heaps on the sides of the roads.
Let us not tell terrible stories about Cannon Air Force Base in Mexico, because I have far, far too many of those.
Well, we like to, here on the Bad at Magic podcast, we like to correct errors that we've made in past podcasts. And this one isn't so much as a correction as it is just helping make our audience smarter. So, listeners, last time I asked Josh the question when we talked about the number 33 and talked about Harry Truman, why his presidency ended in an odd year. So go ahead, Josh.
So, yes, I had to answer this question because the numbers thing was my thing, and you called me out totally in public on the podcast. It's fine. And so I had to make this right. And what I discovered was, just a forehead slapping moment where new presidents aren't sworn in until January 20th. So technically, every president serves until an odd year.
Yeah, that's
so weird. Because Eisenhower was sworn in on January 20th, 1953. So Truman served for 20 days in 1953, and that's when he ended his presidency.
When we talk about presidents, we talk about their terms from their election to their election. But I guess when it goes into the record books, it's actually the following year.
I mean, he's still on the job until the next guy comes in, right?
Oh, yeah. The current president is reminding us that. I'm still your president for the next 53 days.
We're not going down that dark path.
All right. Well, this week I experienced the Dunning-Kruger effect. I was anticipating it was going to happen.
And this is the thing where you vastly overestimate your competence or skill in a thing.
Yes. So when we were discussing the long tail, I mentioned the fact that I had been watching lots of weird sports on YouTube, and I'd taken a liking to disc golf, which is fantastic on YouTube. Watch it. Anything. It's all good. But I got really excited about it, and I looked, and it's only, like $40 to get a set of discs and free to use a course, and there was one 10 minutes away from where I'm staying in Florida. So I thought, hey, something I can do on a Saturday when I'm not working. So last Saturday, I got a set of discs. I went out to the course, and I gave it a try. And I had my hopes up. I'd been watching all these pros and seeing how far they could throw. I knew all the terminology.
I have watched a ton of YouTube. I know how to throw this frisbee like nobody's business.
I knew all the terminology. I knew which throws and which disc to use. And I tumbled from the peak of whatever it's called in the Dunning-Kruger effect all the way down to the bottom valley, where I just realized I know nothing about any of this.
I love how you described that, because so apparently you had a terrible afternoon, and through the course of understanding and realizing that you don't know nearly as much as you think you do, that's a description of tumbling down the side of Mount Stupid. I love that.
Exactly. I was at the peak of Mount Stupid and I tumbled down to the Valley of Despair, but I'm not giving up, Josh. I'm going to start climbing out. I can't possibly do worse than my 98 that I got on the par 60, 38 over.
Why would you even tempt the universe that way? Of course you can do worse than that. You can always do worse than that. It's a number. Like, it can always be higher than 98.
On the 15th hole, I rounded the corner of this dogleg and I threw my disc and I saw a giant splash go up out of the reeds. And I was like, oh man, I only have 3 discs. I don't want to lose a disc. So I wandered over and I could see it in about a foot of water. So I took off my socks and shoes and I wandered out into the water and I picked up my disc and I walked back out, and then I looked back at the sign that said, "Warning, alligators."
I was just going to say, like, what is the matter with you?
What was I thinking?
Like, I'm sitting here worried about the third thing that the universe is going to have come crashing down on your head, and now you start telling me a story about how you waded waist deep into some Floridian swamp? What's wrong with you?
I think I still would have gone after the disc, but I might have waited, looked a little bit longer, maybe poked a few suspicious things with a stick, but yeah.
I mean, you're in Florida. Like, that leeches, mosquitoes, alligators,
I definitely
snakes.
got bit by mosquitoes, but I unknowingly took a risk. I may have, like, stepped on an alligator's head, like the Clueless cartoon that does it because he doesn't know it's there.
Oh, my goodness. Okay, so... Yeah, I'm just going to sit here and fret about the third terrible thing that's going to happen to you from now until it happens.
It's going to be Louisiana. That's the third terrible thing that's going to happen to me. All right, let's set another thing straight from last time. So last time we were talking about real-life examples of the trolley problem in action. And one that I mentioned that I didn't do a lot of research on was medical triage. And you said kind of speculatively, you think that was a relatively recent development, like perhaps in the 20th century. And there's kind of some truth to that, but really the credit for the development of modern triage is given to a French surgeon back in the Napoleonic Wars. So, yeah, back in the 17th century.
I mean, close is relative. If we look at all of human history, I had it spot on.
Yeah. But, the idea of, well, you can only help so many people and you need to help the ones that your help's going to be the most have the most utility for.
Right.
You can go, this is found on like ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs.
Oh, yeah? Really?
Yeah.
That's an interesting concept.
Yeah.
So I guess people have realized at some point that you have a finite amount of time and a finite amount of wounded. You should probably try to, save the most lives in that amount of time.
I'm imagining Egyptian hieroglyphs that look like the trolley problem. Like, a guy with like a wolf head and he's sideways and he's holding a lever and there's like a brick coming down a ramp.
Yeah, one of the big stone blocks. It's like,
there's
now
5 guys over here and 1 guy over here.
For hieroglyphics, it'd be like, do you let it kill the 5,000 slaves, or do you swing it off to kill the one high prince? Oh, well, no question. I mean, just all the slaves are gone, right?
Yeah, I guess that's the Egyptian version of the trolley problem.
Mass genocide versus one person that they find important.
Yeah.
Okay, Ben, so let's transition to away from us catching up on things that we got wrong and we want to be technically correct because that's the best kind of correct. Let's move on to talk about something that everyone cares about so much. And I don't know how this ended up on the show notes, but I am so happy it's here. And that is, it sounds like you just wanted to wax prolifically about the movie The Incredibles.
I absolutely did, Josh. It's in my top 3 all-time favorite films, right behind Groundhog Day and Master and Commander: The Far Side of the World.
That's a good one too.
Yep. So right up there is The Incredibles, which I think the words I used last time are the best superhero film out there, or something like that.
Man, which is a strong endorsement in an age that has the
A
Marvel
lot of good
Cinematic
superhero
Universe.
films. Yeah.
Yes, a lot of good superhero films. But I will have to agree with you. This is definitely right up there with some of the best, and for so many reasons. So
let's go through
just,
some of the reasons.
Yeah, let's just talk about why the movie The Incredibles is amazing. Spoilers, everyone, for the movie The Incredibles, and probably Star Wars.
Pause the podcast and go watch The Incredibles, and then come back and enjoy this talk with us.
Honestly, if you don't come back to the podcast, we won't blame you. The Incredibles is that good.
So I was thinking about it, and I thought, I'll turn it on and watch it again. And I turned it on, and it totally sucked me in, and I just loved it as much as I ever do.
So we're going to have to break this down. Like when I saw this in the show notes, you just had why The Incredibles is awesome. And I rattled off like 14 bullet points. Here's all the reasons I love it. And the first one I came up with is, this is so funny. Part of my wife's master's degree that she got, she had to take a class on film appreciation. And I think I took more out of that class that she took than she did.
Okay.
And one of the things
you're going to go full film critic on us, huh?
For just one, there's just one vocabulary word that I took away from it that has really changed how I view film, and that is mise-en-scène. And I think it's a French term. I think it's a French term. I think. Don't quote me on this. I didn't actually take the class. I took it secondhand. But the idea is that the mise-en-scène is just kind of the feeling of the movie. It's not necessarily what the actors are saying or doing or what the main storyline is. It's all the decision making that happens kind of behind the scenes. What background music is going to be playing? How are we going to stage the shot? What's the camera angles going to look like? How are we going to cut between the two characters? Stuff like that. All of the ancillary and secondary things that you don't think about directly, but how it impacts what the movie feels like.
Okay, and I love it. You could tell that they decided that in advance. Like, what do we want the mise-en-scène of this film to be?
Oh, definitely. And this is what I wrote in the notes, is that they absolutely nailed the mise-en-scène of like a 1960s spy thriller.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Everything from like the big band horns going all the time.
The villain has his own secret island filled with minions.
I mean, it's a superhero action movie, but there's so much like intrigue of like, oh, what's going on over here, and the sneakiness. Just, I don't know, the design choices they made.
Of the houses they lived in, the cars they drove.
Yeah, everything. It feels very like a period piece, but they still have the high technology that you would expect a modern civilization to. Like, they just nailed it. It just feels like you're watching a 1960s spy movie, even though they've all got superpowers.
How did they get away with that? Because until you wrote this, I didn't realize it, and then I watched it and realized you're so right. It was exactly the mise-en-scène of a 1960s spy thriller, but it didn't. When I watched it the first 20 times, I never felt like this is set in 1960.
Well, think about all the times that you see our main character, Mr. Incredible, like interacting with Mirage. There's always like this back and forth kind of almost flirty wordplay that they do, very James Bond style.
Mm-hmm.
There's the fact that Mr. Incredible is just, he's a brawler. He's just, he's got the super strength. But he spends a vast majority of the movie kind of doing the detective sleuth thing where he's trying to figure out what's going on and where are these heroes going and what's the big deal with the volcano base and all that stuff. And it just, everything. Like I said, what blows me away every time I watch the movie again is how well they do the music. Because during the action scenes, you have this big band, a lot of brass and stuff playing like you would have back in the swing dance era.
Yeah.
A lot, and then in like the lower points, you've got a lot of like very subtle xylophone effects and things going on. It just, it's all there.
Dude, I'm hearing it in my head as you're saying this. Okay, it also has a lot of the like checkboxy things that the Bond serials used to have. I mean, it has the setup and the villain and the secret base. It has the gadget scene with Q, except Q is not Q in this movie.
Yes, Q is Edna Mode, which, all right, I could go on and on. She's one of my favorite characters in cinema, and I'll tell you why. I am going to propose right now that Edna Mode is the most fleshed out character in all of cinema for the amount of screen time that she gets in that movie. we know more about Edna Mode's character, her personality traits, her motivation, her backstory. And she was on screen for what, 5 minutes?
Yeah, but you're right. It's just so potent. I mean, she cares. She pretends she doesn't care, but she really cares. It takes a lot of pride in doing a good job. She has very strong opinions. She expects heroes to be heroic.
And she's incredibly successful in what she does and is so disdainful that she's not back at the peak of her career when she was doing like what she considers very challenging work, working with superheroes.
Yeah. There's that scene where she's standing on top of the counter and Helen's like second guessing herself and kind of muttering and descending into self-pity, and she whacks her over the head with the newspaper. I love that scene.
Yeah, and she's just so into it. She's like, you're a flipping superhero. Pull yourself
together. Yeah. Oh, she's great. So another thing I thought that was really interesting about this movie that was really important is Pixar launched a superhero franchise and gave us no origin story. Has that ever happened in the history of superheroes?
Man, that's a good point. Well, so I can think back to the multiple reboots of Spider-Man, and finally we got a Spider-Man reboot where they did not do the Uncle Ben death because it was unnecessary. We all know where Spider-Man came from. That's not the important part of the story. And I think that's what they nailed here is, Brandon Sanderson says this, if you're writing a book about a story, if it's not the most interesting time in the character's life, why aren't you telling that story? And so the interesting part of the story that we're viewing in The Incredibles is not the origin story. It's not how superheroes came to be. It's kind of how superheroes fell and how they had to live this second life.
Yeah, so they start off with that really great like archival footage interview kind of thing where they're reliving the glory days and talking about falling out with the public.
Yes, and that gives you everything that you need. And you get the opening scene with Mr. Incredible at the peak of his game, and there's superheroes doing this superhero thing, which, by the way, all superhero movies have this problem. If you have all these superheroes everywhere, why is there so much crime? Like, I don't get it. Like, if you're not a supervillain, what are you doing? But it's fine. We're going to blow past that. And then we have this scene where we see all the do-gooders out doing good and just living their best life. And then we see a handful of scenes where Mr. Incredible kind of started and catalyzed this downhill fall of all of the superhero structure.
Yeah, it was kind of his fault, wasn't it? But not really his fault. It was like, I felt this may have influenced the Iron Man franchise. It was just his personality flaws that are magnified by the fact that he's an ultra strong superhero that set in motion his own downfall.
Yes. The fact that because he has that limited power set and the handful of things that he had to do caused collateral damage that he wasn't really able to control.
Yes.
But then he also like made it way worse by blowing up and yelling at the guy in court and just like, yeah, he personally screwed up.
I recognized it this time as I was watching it. It's his "I work alone." He repeats it several times throughout the film. I work alone. I work alone. I work alone. And at the end, he has to recognize that he's better when he works with his family, with other supers, than when he works alone. And it was the fact that he insisted on working alone that set up the small things that turned into the big problems.
I see. So if earlier in his career he had taken on like a sidekick with a complementary power set, he probably would have been a lot better off. He would have been better at his job. He would have caused less collateral damage.
Yeah,
I can see
exactly.
That. Yeah, him and Ellen probably would have made a great superhero team, and we see that later in the film when they all team up.
Now, I also like how they set up this societal conflict about how society would cope with there being superheroes. They also did this in the Marvel Cinematic Universe with the whole thing with the Sokovia Accords, where, hey, we got all these supers, they got all these powers, they're out there running around, but who's in charge? Well, in the Incredibles universe, they just decided no superheroes. Like, it's not okay for there to be superheroes out running around.
And they kind of had this shadowy government agent guy that was there that helped relocate them and things. So
yeah, like they went into the witness protection program.
Yeah, so there's this feeling that there was some kind of a federal jurisdiction or governance over the superheroes that were backing them financially somehow, paying Edna to make their costumes or whatever.
But again, that's not the most interesting part of the story, so they don't bother tell it.
Exactly. The important part of the story was the downfall, and now this is something that I could see very easily happening in a society that had certain individuals that had superpowers like that. Like, just imagine the amount of fear that would revolve around that. If Bob decided to go on a rampage in the court, and instead of sitting there and taking his arguments like a responsible citizen, just went full Hulk smash on the building.
Oh yeah.
So people would be genuinely frightened of other people having this kind of power, and they would seek to, if not control, then absolutely contain.
And there was that classic scene in Iron Man 2 where Tony Stark gets called to testify before Congress, and they're sitting there being like, give us the Iron Man weapon so that we, the people, can control it.
Yeah, and he talked about, I have privatized world peace, which is a terrifying statement in of itself. It's like, okay, so we just got to rely on you, Mr. Tony Stark?
Then we go into our whole thing you and I were talking about, like, well, what if I want to be the one who decides what I do with my music collection? But that's the same thing with security, right?
Yeah. What if somebody pissed off Tony Stark and he decided, you know what? Go ahead, terrorist. Have fun. Iron Man's on vacation for a week until I am more appreciated. Or what if he started hitting the government up for funding? Like, there are so many ways that privatizing stuff like that can go horribly, horribly wrong. So if you don't have strict controls over situations like this, and in The Incredibles, it kind of existed because the government was able to tell all the superheroes to go away.
And they pretty much agreed to that.
Now, which is odd because this only works in a world with no supervillains, but we'll brush past that.
They explain that away with just it's so rich in detail, this film. It has like little scenes where they show like a flash of like a black and white photo of a bunch of superheroes in the room signing a contract. Imagine that in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, if they didn't have a civil war, instead everyone signed the Sokovia Accords.
Yeah, but the Civil War was way cooler.
Yeah.
And also,
fight.
I'm going to be a comic book snob for a second. The Civil War and the comic books, way cooler, by the way. But again, we'll move on.
So I love the scene where he's just, because he told Buddy he works alone, it causes a little bit of chaos that gets out of control. The bomb goes out the window, blows up the train tracks, and he has to save the train full of people and Buddy. So he saves the train, he saves Buddy, and he lands on the ground, puts him down, says, "Look, I saved everything, everyone's okay." And the cops go, "Wait a minute, where's the bad guy?"
I mean, he got away.
You mean to tell me he got away?
Do you remember the bad guy's name?
Yeah, Bon Voyage.
Bon Voyage. Monsieur Crable! Like, that was great. That guy was on screen for 4 seconds, and he was in mime costume, like just ridiculous.
He had bombs on his vest. Yeah.
Yes.
But you know, you could see already the problems starting to form where society has really high expectations for what our superheroes are. And it was the same thing in Age of Ultron, Avengers, you know, where like the Avengers are like trying to stop terrorists from getting a hold of a biological weapon. And they're like, well, you tipped over some cars while you were stopping the terrorists from getting the biological weapon.
Yeah, you are referring to the Civil War again? Like, that was not the Age of Ultron. No, that was not the Age of Ultron. The Age of Ultron did not open with them going after the bioagent. That was Civil War. Age of Ultron opened with them attacking Stuker's compound in Sokovia.
You're right. That was Civil War again.
Everybody keeping score.
I'm wondering.
That's Josh 1, Ben 0.
1 for Josh. I'm wondering how much influence there is here between these two things, because I know The Incredibles definitely came before all that.
Well, are we going to do a direct comparison between the two? Like,
no. Let's get back to The Incredibles.
Okay, yeah, let's get back to The Incredibles. I think this is also one of the most reasonable superhero movies that I've seen outside of.
What do you mean by that?
So there's just so many things that they touch on, or like you said, it's so rich and so deep that there's just little snippets of how well they show superheroes existing in a world like they could actually exist. Like just the way that Mr. Incredible, our protagonist, the way Bob approaches his problems, it's always going to be some kind of smash and grab or some like this is his mindset. It's like he knows what his power set is, he knows what his strengths are. This is how it's going to be. When he was in the building trying to save all the people, the building that was on fire with Frozone, like he was
when they're moonlighting as superheroes.
They're moonlighting, yeah, as vigilantes or whatever. and he's relying on Frozone to take care of the fire. He's going to take care of the structure.
So he's got like 6 people over his shoulder.
Yeah, but like he knew his strengths. He knew he wasn't like, I can't go busting through the walls. I'll bring the whole building down. Just the understanding of his limitations and like what he can and can't do in certain situations was incredible. Later in the movie, when we see them all teaming up to fight Syndrome's robot, you can tell that these people have worked together in the past because they started pulling off like combination effects that they wouldn't otherwise be able to do without having extensive experience with each other. Bob threw his wife up at their child it took one sentence. Bob, throw me, and she turned herself into like a spear, and he just like all in one fluid motion like grabbed her and hooked her.
Yeah, he knew it would be okay.
Yeah.
Here's an example that I loved. I don't know, the film I think did this on purpose, where it set it up so that both Bob and Helen had to break into the same fortress, the same, 60s meze-sa spy thriller fortress. And they do it very much, they're both very effectively break into the fortress, but he does it the Hulk way and she does it the spy way.
Yes. And again, understanding their strengths and weaknesses. Like, she hit herself on the side of one of those moving cars.
Right. He picked up the moving car and threw it at the guards.
Yeah, he knocked out like 6 people and just walked in that way.
Right. I mean, he starts sneaking eventually, but yeah.
Eventually, yeah, he started trying to be quiet about it, but then we all know how that ended up.
Yeah, ended in the lightning handcuffs or whatever those are.
Also an awesome scene. But not just that, but then they go really well into depth about what it means, like personally and emotionally, to be a superhero. And we see that in Bob's character, because like the whole arc is about Bob trying to relive his glory days, because he's this unhappy insurance agent and he just wants to go back to helping people. He just wants to go back to Hulk smashing so bad.
Those insurance agent scenes are just so good. He's just squeezed into that comically tiny cubicle and he's sitting there pecking away at his computer with his arms hunched in front of him, like using 2 fingers because he just can't.
And of course he's in the cubicle that has the pillar coming from the ceiling, so half of his space is taken up by the structure.
And he's just demoralized by how he feels like he's not helping anyone anymore, though he used to. And he's got that little old lady from him. And then the light bulb turns on and he realizes that he can help this one person.
You see his whole demeanor change from the monotonous, disinterested insurance agents to don't go down to floor, whatever. Like, he's super engaged and
fill out a form 4379.
Yeah, and he's like covering his mouth and like gives her like a pad of paper.
Yeah.
They're penetrating the bureaucracy.
And then they go home and they have this classic, maybe unequaled in cinema scene of him just having dinner with his family, and it's just the kids are fighting and the wife is frustrated with him, and it all comes across as so utterly authentic. It just absorbs me.
If you've ever had a family dinner, like that is what family dinner is. Like,
it's a little bit dialed up to 11 because everyone's got superpowers, but even with the superpowers, it's still just a family dinner.
Well, yeah, you've got the younger kid who's the star of his own life, just gets in trouble and trying to stay out of trouble with his parents. You've got the overly moody teenage girl, like just at a drop of a hat will go wailing about how her existence is so terrible. And nobody in this family is normal, and she can't resist a good storm off, which that's fine. You've got the mom just trying to keep everything together, and the dad who is clearly not paying any attention.
So when you have a bunch of brilliant people together, they're able to do something that's greater than the sum of the parts. But if you take, for instance, his office, and you go into his office and you just pick a scene where it's kind of zoomed out or panning around, and you pause it for a second and look, he has the most brilliantly put together I love me wall I've ever seen.
There's not a square inch of that wall that is not a framed photo or a newspaper article or some magazine cover of him.
Yeah, doing something awesome. And it tells in 1 second what they don't have to waste any story time on telling, that is, he cannot let go of the glory days of the past.
Yes. And his character screams that. He just wants to go back to that. And which is why when he gets the mysterious tablet in his mail, he goes running headlong face first into what would otherwise be a psychotic situation.
Yeah, well, yeah. And I like how it kind of reveals that he's let himself get a bit soft around the edges. his edge is off a little bit. But then after a moment, he goes full Toby Keith, and he ain't as good as he once was, but he's as good once as he ever was.
I mean, he got the job done and he got the big paycheck. He didn't have to work anymore. So, yeah, I mean, if I didn't have to work anymore, I would spend several hours a day at the gym too.
There's so many other little things, that trips off the training montage where he gets back and you can see he's just revitalized by the fact that he can go back to being a hero again. He doesn't have to do this thankless insurance job and continue hiding, even though he is hiding from his wife. But now that he's training, he starts losing weight. He's excited about the opportunities he's going to offer. And it, even though it's a kid's movie, I love that they put in the little touches like the scene where he goes to leave for the day and she grabs him and pulls him back inside. Or you see her grab his butt from like 40 feet away because her arm is stretchy.
Right. Oh, and that's indicative that he's paying more attention at home. Like they had that scene where he's trying to feed the baby and help the kids with their homework. He's paying more attention to her. It's one of those things. Like if you're in a committed relationship and you feel bad about yourself, it brings the whole relationship down. And then if you start like bringing yourself out of that, everything comes up with it. And that just showed his whole life was getting better because he felt better.
And that shows, and that's what takes a cartoon like this and makes it hit home, because that's such a profound element of humanity that a man feels most well when it feels like he's fulfilling his existence. And Bob was kind of off track of what he felt like was his existence, and then this opportunity came up, he's back on, and now he feels like himself again, and it made him a better lover, it made him a better father, it made him, be well, healthier.
Let's be clear, like, I haven't seen the deleted scenes or anything, but we don't know about the romantic portion of their relationship.
The fully appropriate level for the rating of movie it was.
Yeah, they indirectly indicated that things were going better in the bedroom, I'll give you that.
Yeah. Now... And also, you have a superhero that feels like he can't be himself anymore, and you saw that in microcosm with his son Dash. Dash was kind of chafing at kind of being born and raised under these restrictions and never really knowing the extent of what he could do. He says, "You always tell me do your best, but you don't really mean it."
Well, that's a uniquely weird situation to be in as a parent of a kid who is the Flash, because... yeah, of course we don't mean it. We're supposed to be in hiding. Like they experience the downfall of the superhero society. They understand the opportunity cost that is at risk if he goes and actually does his best. And like all kids, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, old man. Like he doesn't understand any of that. He has none of that perspective. And it's always the one direction, like you just have to believe us. And like all kids do, eventually they start to question that.
And even though it's superhero mom talking to superhero kid, it was still an interaction that felt familiar to me. Like she said, "Dash, I want you to do your best." And he goes, "You always say that, but you don't really mean it." And even though they're talking about superpowers, I swear I've had that exact interaction. Where your kids kind of use your words against you.
Or try to. Yeah, I get that. My kid... my
and they're right sometimes.
My oldest is 9, so I haven't been caught in that verbal trap yet. I'm sure it's coming though.
Yeah, well, you recognize it again when they do it later on, because when they're on the airplane and they're approaching the volcano base and they're being shot at by the missiles, she recognizes that her children's superpowers can help save them.
Yes, but they've never used their superpowers in any real capacity.
Well, not only that, but she's always told them not to.
Yes, it's like that I did put this in the notes as part of the just so many reasons, but this one thing is the kids are super accurate because kids will totally call you out if you double back or say something different from what you said previously.
Yeah, yep. And I definitely have that experience all the time. You know what I say to my kids? You cannot use my words against me. I know, and this is what Helen says. I know what I said. Listen to what I'm saying now.
Which is the parental way of trying to explain, like, the situation has changed entirely. The circumstances under which I gave you previous instructions is no longer valid. We face a new universe in which I need you to listen to the things I am telling you at this point. But you don't want to say all that or have a an in-depth discussion with your children in the moment. You just need them to listen and obey. We're at level 1 here, kids.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to imagine when it would be something like that, where you're like telling your kids to do something you told them never to do.
Great example is I constantly tell my kids to not be so loud. Like, you guys are loud. You need to be quieter. Just quieter. You're at like a 7. I need you at a 4. That's just a standard thing that I'm saying in my house all the time. Guys, quiet down. Then we went to Legoland for a family vacation. I said, okay, so here's the thing. If somebody grabs your hand or starts walking off with you, I need you to scream at the top of your lungs and continue screaming until one of us gets you back from this person. And like, I understand I've always told you to be quiet your whole life. This is the one situation where I want you to be as loud as possible.
Did they react just like Dash did to Helen in the cave? Where she's like, Dash, if you get in trouble, I want you to run as fast as you can. He goes, as fast as I can? Yes, Dash, as fast as you can.
My kids were too young. Like, they were still at the point where they couldn't quite comprehend and understand the concept of being kidnapped. So I don't, like, they were more concerned and confused about the concept of being abducted than they were about me telling them to be loud when I've told them previously to be quiet.
This feels like a one-off I think we need to explore in other things, because people who are high on the agreeableness scale of the psychological profile are the ones that would be like, no, I got to follow the rules. And they're the ones that die, when there's a fire and they want to go out the way they came in instead of through the nearest exit. They're the ones that were told to stay at their desks in Tower 2 of the Twin Towers on September 11th and didn't get out in time. It was the disagreeable ones that made it out. Okay.
So this is something we should explore, is the agreeableness and how it threatens your life sometimes.
So there were other aspects of children that I think they really nailed in this. Okay. You listed a few here. I assume they came from your personal experience, but I'm assuming the first time you watched this, you didn't have children. So
yes, the first time I watched this, I didn't have children. So it gives me great perspective, like the first time I viewed it versus the last time I viewed it, and how my perspective has changed. One of my favorite examples is Too Many Questions. Any listener that has children of talking age understands what Too Many Questions means. Yeah. I remember telling myself, Ben, I remember telling you, when I was single and no children, like, when my child asks me a question, I'm going to do my best to impart my adult wisdom into this tiny thing. What I didn't recognize at the time is that a child is capable of producing 1,000 questions a minute, and they don't care about the answers. It's more of just this nonsensical stream of consciousness. And it gets to the point where I, like, several times in the last couple of months, I've just cut my son off. I'm like, kid, too many questions. You're done. No more questions. Like, I can't. I just can't. My brain is too tired from trying to follow your brain around all day. I'm done. No more questions.
Okay, so that's definitely a genuine. No more. Too many questions.
Yes. So the next one I put in was getting into your, and it's bleeped out, but getting into your stuff, into your business. Like, Helen was in her room, like, with the costumes,
she was unloading the bag, and she had the extra ones that Edna had given her for the kids.
Yes, and she was just in her room by herself on the phone. And at some point, both children came in while she's on the phone trying to talk and have a private conversation, and got their costumes and was like, what are you doing? What is this thing? Look at this. And just, will you two please just shut up and leave me alone for 5 seconds?
Right, like, you weren't even supposed to see this. I just took it out of my bag because it was in the way.
I'm in my room. The door was shut. What are you even in here for? The bickering. I feel like they nailed the sibling bickering for the whole movie.
Really good.
I already talked about the overly dramatic teenage girl emotions, which I have not experienced, but it seems like they're very genuine. Can you speak more to that? Did they nail the emo teenage girl trying to discover her place in the world?
They kind of tried to have a character arc for Violet, where at the beginning, she's stalking. She knows her boy crush's schedule, and she's waiting outside for him to come out for his next class. But then when he notices her, she goes invisible. Yeah. And then at the end of the movie, when he goes to ask her out for a date, she's very confident, and she even kind of cuts him off and sets it up really self-confidently. So They're trying to show her getting some confidence, but I think in the second movie they more delve into the more the other aspects of teenageriness that I think you're kind of inferring here.
Okay. Well, I don't have teenagers yet, thank goodness. So I can't really speak.
I wouldn't say that. I want to take a moment and fight against the stereotype that having teenagers sucks, because I think having teenagers is awesome.
All right, you're just going to throw that out there? I thought you were going to launch into some like multi-bullet point explanation.
That's
you're just putting it out there? Teenagers
having
are
teenagers
awesome?
is great, yep.
It's a trade-off. I've already identified it's a trade-off. Like, my son is going to be less cute when he's a teenager, but he'll be capable of doing more interesting things to me. So pluses and minuses around the board.
All right, so kids aside, what about the grown-ups?
So the grown-ups in this movie, some of them, this movie does such a good job of making great characters and such great character moments and such quotable moments and so many great things. We already talked about Edna. Man, I don't even know where to start. Let's just talk about how many perfect quotes exist in this movie because of all of the interactions that happen.
Oh man, one time my wife and I had an epic thing where we were trying to get all the kids in the car, and I yelled upstairs to her and she yelled back at me, and I think our brains got in sync and we recreated the "Where is my super suit" dialogue from her upstairs and me downstairs. Did the whole scene, yelled it. My kids just thought it was hilarious. It was a hit. It was fantastic. Where is my super suit?
That will go down in history. There's not anyone on the planet that hasn't heard Samuel L. Jackson do that bit. And if you haven't, shame on you, and go YouTube it this second.
And his wife does the best part too. I am the greatest good you're ever gonna get.
It's like, why? It's like, 'cause I need it. It's like, what?
We're talking about the greater good here.
And that interaction between the husband and the wife, where it's just like, hey, where is this thing? Why do you need it? No. We're not having a discussion about why I need it. I'm asking you a question. Just give me the answer. And like, that's where the friction in that whole back and forth came from.
Yeah. There's the no capes thing that Edna does. That's a classic.
We say that every time we see a cape on TV. Every time I'm watching some superhero movie with a cape. We were watching Age of Ultron the other day, and Vision like manifested that cape because he was like jealous of Thor for some reason. And my wife and I like simultaneously went, no capes.
They don't really make any sense. Maybe Batman's, because it sometimes is functional.
Capes, yeah. And this movie, again, another reason this is a great superhero movie. They actually dive into
send up superheroes.
Capes are stupid. And nobody on Earth thought about that until Edna did her whole presentation about all the people that died because they were wearing a cape.
And in the end, it's how the villain dies.
It's a major plot point, and it's fantastic. No capes.
There's a scene where Violet is talking to Dash about what she's concerned about, and she says, Mom and Dad's lives could be in jeopardy, or worse, their marriage.
So that feeds back into kids just having no perspective on things that are important, and Dash having no concept of what really was going on that whole time.
Yeah, he didn't understand.
A very underappreciated quote that I use all the time is when at the beginning of the movie, back in the glory days, when Buddy was in the back of the squad car, he's like, oh yeah, his name's Buddy whatever, and he goes, my name is Incrediboy, and then Mr. Incredible yells at him, you're not affiliated with me.
You use that?
I use that all the time. I don't know how or in what situation, but I just love the fact that he said that. Like, he had to stop what he was saying to the police officer to reinforce that to this kid. You are not affiliated with me.
So one thing that I really related to in this film is how accurately they seem to have captured what a midlife crisis must feel like. I remember watching this and feeling like I hadn't gotten there yet, but if I did, this seemed like what it would be like. Helen seemed to have figured out her place in the world. She seemed to know what was going on, but Bob just wasn't coping with all the changes. So, he's questioning himself and trying to find his place in the world. And, he has that scene where he's just had a horrible, frustrating day, and he drives home and he gets out of his car and, he slips on his skateboard in the driveway, and then he slams the door, and the door won't shut because he creased it with his hand when he fell on the skateboard, and then he breaks the glass, and just is about to fly into like a white hot rage, and he picks up his car, and there's that little boy on the big wheel sitting there.
And imagine if that kid hadn't have been there, he would have hucked that car into the next county.
I described on this program my exact moment like that about a month and a half ago, where I had just been beat down by the Air Force, and I was sore, and I was frustrated, and I got home, and I was just ready to throw my car into the next county.
Yeah,
someone else's car.
Everybody has felt that, like the culmination of the tiny little things until it just breaks you.
Yeah, the thing that I got mad about, the thing he got mad about, like slipping on the skateboard in the driveway, was just a little tiny thing. He didn't even get hurt.
Oh no, that was the catalyst. That was the straw that broke the straw. Back.
That's it. Yeah, great moment. There's so many brilliant little touches in this film that you wouldn't even think about in a cartoon. He's on the tropical island. To give you the feel of the tropical island, Dash slaps a mosquito,
Mm-hmm.
Helen is like thinking about being a superhero again, and she walks past a mirror, and she kind of checks out her butt in the mirror and thinks it looks big, and she doesn't say anything. It's just this like glance, but it's such a brilliant little moment for an animated cartoon. There's that scene where she's breaking into the fortress, and she has it's that brilliant sequence where her body gets stretched across like 3 locked doors.
Yes.
And she's fighting people in 2 rooms at once, and she can't see what's going on, and she feels the guy and feels for his face and then punches it.
Yes, it's like, that's a jaw. Yes, that had to be a really weird situation, because you know where your hands are usually, right? Like imagine you can close your eyes and you can kind of feel in 3-dimensional space where your limbs are. But now imagine it could be 70 feet away in the next room. Like that's weird. Another one of the moments that I like the most in this movie is when Dash and Violet get caught by the 2 minions, the masked, nameless dudes that are on this island. And Dash runs away, and Violet goes invisible and dives into a river. And the guy, the nameless minion, immediately, like no hesitation, goes, "You can't hide from me," and throws dirt upriver and just watches it flow down. Like, that's genius. First of all, I don't think I would have thought of that at the drop of a hat. This guy's clearly thought about how he would combat an invisible enemy.
Yeah.
But, we're going to talk about this more today, but that moment like just stands out as an excellent Minion moment.
It's kind of a theme of it that superhero powers aren't limitless. That there's flaws and drawbacks and weaknesses that they have. And that's why I think the ultimate theme of the film, that you're better when you work together as part of a team, is so important, because their weaknesses are shored up by their partner's strengths. And while we're watching people who have super strength and are super flexible or can make force fields or run so fast they can run on water, really it's something we all can relate to, because my wife and I are better as a couple because we both have strengths and weaknesses, and we shore up each other's weaknesses and benefit from the other one's strengths.
Aw. Like, I can't even say something like that now, because it'd be just way too sappy of a moment. Like, I feel like I've got to be the counterpoint to bring it, to be the funny guy for your straight man line that you just delivered.
Yeah.
But I guess props to Alicia. Good job.
This is a great time for a side asterisk. Now, I think you guys have these in your family. I think you even sent me one that you've done this week, where you were imagining what if Moses came down from the mountain with 15 commandments, what were the other 5?
Yes, we did that this week.
So my family does one like that from The Incredibles. We have this ongoing debate in my house with me and my 6 children about whether Dasher Robert Parr is faster than Sonic the Hedgehog. Neither of them, they've never actually raced, but we have enough canon between the 2 of them to try to compare the 2. So whenever this argument crops up in my family and we're sitting around the dinner table arguing, like it's like 2 comic book geeks arguing whether Batman would win or Superman would win.
Superman would crush Batman before he even knew about it.
Right. Yeah, Superman could travel through time. Batman has some nice gadgets. I get it. But Dash Parr is faster than Sonic the Hedgehog, and I'm standing by it.
What? Okay. That's... I have absolutely no dog in this fight, but I can tell you that you're wrong. There's no way It's in his name. He can go faster than the speed of sound. His name is Sonic the Hedgehog. We have no canon of Dash going faster than the speed of sound.
Sonic's already mature. Dash is just a little boy.
So we're going completely off canon. You're saying that like a fully peak performance Dash at like 24 is going to be way faster than Sonic the Hedgehog. That's what you're saying now?
I'm saying that in order for us to have this fun repartee at our dinner table, somebody has to represent the other point of view. And I've gotten practiced at representing the Dash point of view.
Oh, Ben, like I am ready to throw out the rest of this show notes and just go full. I'm going to rip my shirt off and we're going to go full Sonic versus Dash. Is this what we're doing now?
Well, I was surprised that Sonic the Hedgehog has now made another appearance on the Bad at Magic podcast.
Yeah, that movie was really bad.
There's other great moments, like the scene where they've just flown a Winnebago 2,000 miles through outer space and have re-entered the atmosphere, and now they're arguing over what exit to take on the freeway. I love that scene.
All right, everyone pay attention, because this is what separates a good movie or an average movie from a great movie. We have 15 seconds. We have to the point of that entire scene was we have to somehow show the protagonist arriving at point A and getting to point B where the showdown is going to take place. Like, we just have to communicate the fact that they traveled in some way. It doesn't matter. They could have done a quick jump cut montage and we would have accepted it.
Yeah.
But they took it as an opportunity to flesh out the characters and the story.
Oh, they did all of them. They fleshed out Mirage, where she kind of, helped him out, getting out. They fleshed out the mom and the dad, kind of just having this like mom and dad argument. The kids, meanwhile, get tossed around in the back, and they're like, "How are you doing back there?" And they're all like thrown all over the place, like, "Super duper, Dad, do it again."
But this is the idea: is you have this tiny little time to tell just one almost inconsequential part of the story, but they took full advantage of every second of it to make the characters feel more real and to have a fun moment with. Like, it just, everything was good about it.
Yeah. And I've mentioned the moral of working as a team, which I think is the big one. But there's also the importance of being honest, and how that has consequences for his marriage and his life. And there's also being kind and how that pays, and the times that he is kind, like when he lets Mirage go, that pays off for him. And when he, was, buddy, you're not affiliated with me, and hits the eject button, that that turned into a supervillain in the future. Just like when Tony Stark stranded, I can't remember his name.
The Whiplash guy or something in Russia?
No, the guy that can reheal his arms and his skin turns on fire.
Oh, the Merovingian. Yeah.
Yeah.
Iron Man 3. Boo. Iron Man 3.
No. I think it follows the same kind of thing in that, a mistake he made in his past where he basically told that guy to go jump off the roof, eventually became an evil mastermind that he has to fight later in the future. And again, we're not superheroes, but we relate to that because one little bad decision we made in the past may come back to haunt us in the future and be something we actually can't just ignore and have to face.
While I completely agree, I'm starting to feel like that bag's getting a little thin for Iron Man. Like, this is a complete tangent, but I've got to do it. Iron Man 2 was based off Whiplash, who was the son of a Russian guy that Howard Stark worked with to make the arc reactor that got screwed over. So a ghost from Tony's past. So
that was a ghost of his father.
A ghost of his father's past coming back to haunt him. Iron Man 3 was the Merovingian, blew the guy off, created this technology, came after, like, for some reason, instead of just, being rich and famous, he decided to come after Tony Stark personally. That's a ghost from Tony's past. There was another one. Spider-Man, Far From Home, is the guy that worked for Tony Stark.
Another ghost from Tony's past.
Another ghost from Tony's past. Like, okay, guys, we get it. Tony Stark was a jerk in his younger years. He didn't make all the supervillains. Like, there's other places these guys are coming from.
Well, sometimes you just actually made them, like Ultron.
That's a ghost from Tony's present. Like, man, Tony Stark is responsible for a large percentage of the supervillains in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Which is why he had to atone for his sins and give his life.
Or because Robert Downey Jr. didn't want to live under a Disney contract anymore. I don't know.
You always chew me out for getting too meta and not being absorbed by this story. That was terrible for
come on. You know how this works. We've got to be point and counterpoint. So, like, if you're going to take the story road, I've got to take the meta road. That's how this works.
So, Avengers, Incredibles, 5-star, love it.
Go watch it.
Totally endorse it. Bad Magic Podcast endorses. Since I arrived in Florida, I took the opportunity to watch the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe again. I watched it all with the exception of, I think, that one Hulk movie that's technically part of it. And because, I don't know, Disney doesn't have the rights to that one. And the Captain Marvel, which I rewatched recently and didn't enjoy it. And I just couldn't do it. I even watched the Thor movies. But
you watched Thor 2, Dark World? That was terrible.
Yeah. While I was... They all have their moments. While I was watching... the Avengers Endgame, I was just having a moment where I'm a bit meta, and there's the scene where Ant-Man's being released from the quantum realm in the back of the van in the impound lot. Okay. And if you recall this scene, a rat crawls across the panel, switches the thing on, and it shoots Paul Rudd out the back of the van, and then he's stuck inside of a cage. And he alerts the security guard on duty, and this was a cameo. Do you remember who the cameo was?
No, I don't remember. Oh, it was Lou. Was it Lou Ferrigno?
No, it was Ken Jeong of the Hangover fame.
Oh, okay. Oh, I did not know that.
Well, the thing I noticed this time around is he's sitting there at his very security guard-looking booth with a bunch of black and white monitors up in front of him, and he's reading a book. And I paused it, and I was like, hey, that's Ken Jeong. And so I was pausing it, and I looked it up, and sure enough, he did a cameo in the movie. And I'm like, wait a minute, what book is he reading? So I looked at the spine of the book he was holding, and it was called Terminal Breach. So I Googled it. And Terminal Breach, apparently the plot summary that I found, is about some terrorists getting control of some Minuteman III nuclear missiles at Minot Air Force Base in North Dakota. And I thought, I know a lot about that. I'm really interested in that. I'll read the book. So my Audible credit had just come up. I spent it on that, and I read the book that Ken Jeong was reading in Avengers Endgame.
Wow, talk about 6 degrees to Kevin Bacon.
And it was terrible. I realized is I think the point the movie is trying to make is that a security guard reads trashy novels, because it was really bad.
It literally could have just been, I guarantee you, it was just a random paperback that they had in the props cart that was on site that day.
I'm wondering if when they were sitting around storyboarding this thing, Ken Jeong used to be a doctor. I don't know if you knew this. He was a doctor who then became a stand-up comedian, who then became an actor. He does a hilarious routine about why he's not a doctor anymore, because it sucks. but someone made the decision to deliberately have him reading that book. And at first I thought maybe it's because it was a good book and they just threw it in. They're like, I really like this book. But about halfway through, I kind of stopped and I'm like, they put this book in there because it sucks. Like,
so you think someone made the deliberate decision to put Terminal Breach as the book the security guard was reading because it's a terrible book?
Yes. So I think that was a deliberate decision.
What you are proposing is more than 2 people sitting in a room discussing what terrible book that a random security guard should be reading in the 1 second that he is on screen of a multi-billion-dollar movie franchise.
Yes, or Ken Jeong had some personal influence over it and made the decision himself. But you're right, it was probably someone in the props department, maybe not the writers department.
Yeah, we need a paperback book. It's like, oh, I've got one of those right here.
Yeah. Okay. So there's another thing I learned about reading Terminal Breach. I know a lot about how Minuteman III missiles are controlled, operated, and launched.
Spoilers. Gosh.
Yeah, the worst kind of spoilers. I should not read books that are authors without experience delving into something and trying to sound like they know a whole lot about something that they don't know very much about, because it really ruined it for me.
Well, that's not how the communication system goes.
On the other hand, if I read a John Grisham novel that's about what happens by lawyers in the courtroom, I'm like, that sounds right to me.
Let's hope John Grisham doesn't ever write a book about something you have 10,000 hours in, because it'll just destroy him for you.
So yes, I read a novel because I was watching one of the MCU and I saw a character, the cameo in the movie reading the novel. Yes.
I have never heard a weaker reason for reading a book. Like, honestly, that's got to be like the lowest level like recommendation for a book.
Cannot recommend Terminal Breach.
Can I nitpick for a second? Actually,
go ahead.
Not nitpick. I'm going to put a footnote on this conversation we're having. I mentioned I thought the security guard was Lou Ferrigno as the cameo. That's not true. Lou Ferrigno was the security guard cameo in the Hulk movie that you said deliberately that you didn't watch.
Yes. Yes, and of course Lou Ferrigno played the Hulk back in the television serials in the 80s.
Yes.
All right, so you had some bad at parenting for us.
I mean, I don't know if this is bad at parenting so much as a realization that I had in the past 2 weeks. At some point when I was preparing a meal for my family and children came rushing through the kitchen and, put me in a precarious position with whatever it was I was holding at that moment. And I have said always, I enforce this very strictly. My wife is very much more lax about it. But this actually made me sit down and think, why am I so strict about this rule? And that is no children in the kitchen, no kids in the kitchen. There's no playing in the kitchen. There's no reason for you to be in the kitchen. And I don't know if my wife actually asked me, why do you not want kids in the kitchen all the time? Or why are you so strict on this? But then I sat down and actually started thinking about it. If you think about the kitchen in your house, it has hot surfaces. Sometimes it has open flames. It has most of the sharp objects that are in your house. It has probably most of the toxic chemicals that are in your house. And it also contains probably the highest mess potential per cubic meter of anything else that's stored in the building. I just imagine, you see all those YouTube videos.
So when you say it like that, it should be behind 3 secured doors with a pass card and 2-factor authentication.
Well, yeah, any YouTube video you've ever seen of a kid getting in a flower, that's a tiny bag that can make an enormous mess. And so there's just no reason. The potential for disaster is so high in the kitchen. There's no reason for kids to be running through. Especially when you're preparing a meal. And so I was preparing a meal and children were being children in the vicinity. And I came down kind of hard, you need to get out of the kitchen. I have fire right here, a knife in my hand, boiling liquid over here, and toxic chemicals within arm's reach. Get out.
Hey, that's a good list. All right, so bad parents let their children in the kitchen?
This is not so much a bad at parenting as it is just a realization of I had a rule, and when I sat down to think about it, it just reinforced, this is a good rule.
It's a good rule. I've told you what mine is like that. No playing with doors.
Playing with doors?
A door is a fulcrum, a pivot, an inclined plane, and a shearing force in the hands of a very small person can sever a limb.
I remember when you said that the first time on this podcast, and I thought to myself, well, doors can hurt you, but they're not that big a deal. But then you listed that list of things and made me realize that, the mechanical advantage that a child can receive by swinging a door is so great that the potential for disaster is very, very high.
Yeah, if the kid has their fingers in the hinge side of the door and a child shuts the door, you could have an amputation.
Yeah, and this is an excellent rule that I never would have thought of until you rattled off that list of mechanical engineering terms.
So my bad at parenting this week is I want to revisit something I think I introduced on the second episode of Bad at Magic. So if you've got new listeners that haven't gone back that far, I want to give the 20-second version of what I call Ben's fundamental parenting theory. My fundamental parenting theory is that as a parent, I thought my objective was to teach my children to be obedient. And I realized very early on that was only the first of what I consider roughly 4 levels of development. So the first is say, yes, daddy, and do it, teaching my children to be obedient. The second is having them learn to be more involved in asking, what else can I do to help, instead of just only doing what they're told. The third level is figuring out themselves what needs to be done and doing it. And then the fourth level is once they've learned all that, they go out on their own, become adult, and they get to set their own priorities and figure out what needs to be done and do it.
These are all, I always imagine this, because I'm a nerd, as a vector. So stage 1 being yes, daddy, and do it is just a point on the line. This is where we're at. You go do this.
Right.
Then what else can I do to help?
What
else can I do to help is just recognizing that there is a line and that maybe they could contribute to the travel down the line. And then the third one being like, you don't have to be the one instigating the development down this vector. And then the fourth one being they need to define their own vector.
Yes. Yeah, but the important part of the third one is still that they're working my priorities. Like, they're getting something clean because I want it clean. They're just not asking me how to do it.
They're still,
or when.
Exactly. They're still on your vector, but they're recognizing that you don't have to be the one to initiate action.
So here's my problem. Of my 5 children, sorry.
How many children do you have, Ben? Like, I realize that I'm the worst parent here, but you just forgot a step ahead of myself. You forgot a whole person.
No, I got ahead of myself. Of my 6 children, 5 of them I've been able to keep them on this curve. Like, we've taken concrete steps along the way. I can see progression. I can see regression. I can define where they're at. One child I have has defied this thing the entire way. She's now 17 years old. And she has her whole life wanted to go straight to step 4. I don't want you, Mom or Dad, to define my priorities. I don't want to do something because you told me to do it. I definitely don't want to ask you what else needs to be done. And there's no way in heck I'm going to go figure out what needs to be done on my own and do it because that's what you want.
So you're describing like a TV sitcom rebellious teenage daughter.
Yeah, but if she was also independently motivated to, I don't know, get a tattoo or have a boyfriend or wear immodest clothing or something like that, then it would be the sitcom version. But in my version, it's just she just wants to sit in a room and not do anything.
Yeah. You listed 3 of probably some of the mildest problems people have with teenage daughters. You recognize that, right?
Those are all beyond where she is.
Getting a tattoo, having a boyfriend, and I forgot the third one already. Oh, wearing immodest
clothing.
Well, I understand that you're a little more conservative than I am, but we're not talking like full, like dresses up to the neck and ankle length, right?
No.
Okay.
I'm just talking about things that are meant to be deliberately provocative and sexy.
But that's so I understand what you're saying, and no grown man wants to have their daughter dressing deliberately provocatively sexy. But there is definitely a middle ground where she feels good about herself, and that's the key. It's not necessarily a provocativeness.
But you're missing my point.
Am I? Okay.
We haven't had conflicts on any of those 3 things.
Oh.
She doesn't want a boyfriend. She doesn't want to dress sexy, and I can't remember what the other one was.
We're going to keep forgetting the third part of this list. Tattoo. Getting a tattoo.
She doesn't want a tattoo. She just doesn't want to work my priorities.
Okay, so what are her priorities? Have you asked her that?
That's the problem. She doesn't have any right now.
Well, of course she doesn't. She's 17.
So, I am still, as of right now, I haven't been exposed to anyone with COVID recently, and I'm planning to fly home on the 31st of December to go visit my family for a few days and meet my eldest son's current steady girlfriend that could potentially someday be my daughter-in-law.
Oh, is this his first steady girlfriend that he's had since returning from his mission?
I refuse to answer that question on the grounds that it may incriminate me.
I would like to propose that he should have at least double-digit girlfriends before he settles down. Throwing that out there.
I'm pleading the Fifth Amendment. I'm trying to imagine what this would look like, what you just described. Should he then do like some kind of weird speed dating to just get the odometer up to double digits?
He needs to have sampled enough different things in the world to be able to define. He has not.
Okay, Josh, we talk about things that are so normal in our world that just aren't in other worlds. You're a little bit of an outsider when it comes to our culture. You know, there are other cultures in the world where like 4 generations live in a 2-bedroom house. You know, like how do you father children when you're living in the same house as your mother and your grandmother? I don't know, but they figure it out. Somehow that happens in other cultures that aren't ours. In my culture, it's not that unusual to go with a steady girlfriend when you're 21, marry her, and be her wife for 22 years, as I have now.
I mean, yes, and that's wonderful that has worked out for you.
And if my son comes home and says, this is my girlfriend, and we've prayed about it, and we want to be married forever in the temple, I would welcome her into our family and expect that he would follow through on his promise.
I am so terrified that is all right. So, all right, this might be a personal sticking point with me because this is a very hard lesson that I had to learn growing up. Is the difference between love and lust. So there was many girls that I went with in college that I told them and I thought that I loved them when really I lusted after them. And until I was able to discern that difference in myself, I was not capable of making a smart decision on who to get married to.
Okay, here's my attempt to be profound. I don't think I did not have to make that same transformation, but it didn't require multiple girls for me to develop that maturity.
Okay, granted, because you are a much more mature person than I am.
Just saying, I required the same level of learning the difference between what it means to lust after someone and love someone, but I didn't have to date a lot of girls to figure that out.
Okay. I mean, I obviously can't negate your subjective experience, so I guess we're going to move on. So what are the problems that you're currently having with your ill-defined, non-vector having 17-year-old daughter?
Well, she has started her college application, and because she has to write like 3 or 4 essays, she's just been postponing it, and she's going to miss the deadline.
Okay.
And I can't decide if I want to force her to finish her college application because that's the next step she's supposed to be taking, or does the fact that she can't finish her college application mean that she doesn't have sufficient maturity and self-motivation that she'll even be successful in college in the first place? Like, the application is a proxy for the experience itself.
Have you asked her, like, what her plans are? Like, what does she want for her future?
Yeah. I get non-committal answers that are very much something exhibited in my extended family of decision by indecision. By not deciding, you're deciding for the negative.
Yes, inaction over action. That's a thing, and she's just going to end up getting some entry-level job somewhere. And how much agency does she take in her own life? That's a good question, because there are a lot of people in the world that I feel like that do take the proper steps and like recognize these are the things that I need to change, and they take the proper steps to change them. But there are also a set of people that they don't understand why their life doesn't go their way when they take no steps to change it. And like life is always a thing that's happening to them, not something that they're living.
That's a great question. I think if there were a slider on that, and at one end she thought she could determine absolutely everything that happened in her life, and at the other end she feels like just Jesus take the wheel. She's probably at like the 60% level, I'd say, where she recognizes that she has control over her life and her future and things, but sometimes stuff happens that she doesn't want and she feels like it's not her fault.
Okay.
So here's where I was going with all of that. Because I'm flying home on the 31st, but I'm here and I'm probably going to have, a good like 4-day weekend over Christmas and stuff. I'm just going to be sitting around with nothing to do. I invited her to come down here with me. So 2 weeks before that, she's going to arrive, and I'll have her with me here in Florida. I'll just get the hotel room next door, and she'll stay there, and I'll have her to myself for 2 full weeks. So is this going to be 2 weeks where like I'm trying to set her on the path and help her set herself up for success in the future, or is that fruitless and I should just make it a good, happy memory and time we spend together?
I think it's going to be 2 weeks of you going to work from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. and her living a Florida spring break while you're not at home. Like it's going to be her like hitting up the homeless guy that lives across the street for whatever like mind-altering substances exist in the local area. Her finding the local scene. I don't know. This could spiral way out of control.
The gap between who my daughter actually is and someone who does drugs is it's the Grand Canyon.
I'm just saying, like, there's going to be a lot of unsupervised time where your daughter, a teenage daughter that can drive, is going to be left unsupervised in Florida.
Yeah, well, we'll see.
It's one thing. One thing about being in Illinois, it's a whole other thing being in Florida.
She'll be here for a grand total of like 4 work days, I think. It's not going to be a lot, and they'll be truncated days. I'll be home by 2.
Man, you are seriously underestimating the amount of stuff you can get up to in 4 days.
Yeah, well, I'm just deciding what my parenting strategy is going to be for that time. Is it just to make happy memories or is it to help perhaps have one last chance to adjust the trajectory of the rest of her life?
So, okay, here's another suggestion. Like, you're talking about trying to like aim her in a direction that you think is good. What about taking the time to just the two of you to really kind of explore what she wants? Maybe go look at some trade schools or some college campuses or some community colleges and just trying to really look and figure out what is it that you want from your life and what's the best vector to get you there.
I love that, Josh. I think that's the first good parenting advice you've given to me this year, and I'm totally going to take it.
All right. If you're still paying attention, everyone, that's Josh 2, Ben 0.
All right. Let's transition to our last topic that we were going to talk about today.
All right. So once again, in true Baddick Magic fashion, we are going from the pinnacle of things that are super important and just so vital in our daily existence to things that mean absolutely nothing. And we are going to discuss Minions.
Yes, not the little yellow guys. In fact, the little yellow guys were frustrating me this week because while I was trying to do research about this, I couldn't find any actual good writing and background on this because of the little yellow guys.
This was definitely one of the subjects where my very good memory for movies that I've seen came in handy because I didn't have to do internet searches. Like, I have this encyclopedia, like, okay, ask me what my daughter's birthday is, and I'm going to fudge the year probably. But man, boy, howdy, I can tell you how many people died in the third scene of the Patriot movie. Like, I don't know why. There's some things that stick in my brain and some things that don't, and the things that do are just not important. But
okay, so last time we were talking about movies and stuff, and we were talking about this Hollywood convention that seems to go unquestioned, that there are always endless hordes of nameless, motivationless people that are there to be a foil to our hero.
Think of any action movie where they infiltrate into some bland corporate area, and then they'll trip an alarm, and all of a sudden there are hundreds of dudes with fully automatic weapons and ski masks, even though it's the height of summer, and why you would be wearing a ski mask at work boggles the mind, but they just show up and start turning into this cannon fodder for our protagonist to chew through.
Yeah, that's one kind of minion. There's the security minions. There's lots of those.
Security minions.
There's also the kind of minions that, like, you know, if there's a big group of, like for instance in the Dark Knight, when Joker robs the bank, you know, everyone comes in dressed in clown masks.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Those.
You know, you can't just have one guy with a gun dressed in a clown mask. You need however many, 10.
Yeah, 8 or 9 or however many you had. Yeah.
Yeah, whatever. Where did those guys come from? Who knows? They're just minions.
Yes.
Joker's the mastermind here, even though he says he's not.
And there are so many aspects of this topic that we need to discuss. And like I love the concept of minions, and I think way too much about this because all I can ever think about is for every faceless person that you see, there is a whole infrastructure, a whole corporate bureaucracy built around the recruitment, retention, training, and retirement of these people. These aren't just robots that they're manufacturing off of a line and sending to their deaths. These are...
sometimes they are.
Well, okay, fair enough. Sometimes they are. But in that case, like, who built these robots? Who designed... Like, there's all these questions that revolve around the backstory of the nameless guy. That's what...
Okay,
that's what
but
really
when you try to answer those questions, it's not interesting. You know, it violates the Brandon Sanderson rule. Like when George Lucas tried to go back and explain where stormtroopers came from, it wasn't interesting.
That is valid. No, I agree with you. I just like thinking about it. Like, I don't want to see it. I don't think that's the important part of the movie.
You want it to be a Robot Chicken sketch.
Yeah, exactly. I want to see the stormtroopers sitting around in the locker room complaining about the Jedi that keep cutting through every other
This
day.
is why the internet was born. There's a fantastic one of like a bunch of stormtroopers sitting around in a break room on a break pretending to drink coffee even though they've got their masks on, and they're all asking about where you were when the Death Star blew up, like the same way people might sit around in a break room and talk about September 11th, 2001.
Oh, that is awesome. I'm going to go watch that.
Yeah. I'll put it in the show notes.
While we're talking about Star Wars again. Spoilers for Star Wars, everybody. Have you seen the latest or that scene in The Mandalorian with the 2 bike stormtroopers at the beginning of the episode were just sitting there talking for like 5 minutes?
Yes.
I honestly thought that was a joke the first 5 minutes of that episode. And the best part is when one of them takes out his pistol and starts shooting at the can that's got to be 15 feet from him. And
he keeps missing.
And he keeps missing. The other guy like scoffs at him and pulls out his pistol and he can't hit it either. Like, oh, that's just so good.
So another type of notorious minion, good guy minion, are red shirts in the Star Trek universe. Now, people that don't know think just red shirts mean you're going to die, but the red shirt, the color of the uniforms in the Star Trek universe indicates a role on the ship, and the red guys are security. So they are like the Marines. They're the troops of the ship. But in the classic and maybe one of the best Star Trek films, Galaxy Quest, one of our named characters actually gets put into a red uniform. He's like, wait a minute, I can't wear this uniform. I don't want to die.
Yeah, I don't even have a last name. Like, I'm security officer number 4.
Sam Rockwell. It's the same actor that plays Justin Hammer in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yes.
But that film is so great in that it's aware of the conventions and the jokes, and it's a bit of a send-up, but it's also a love letter. But it is kind of questioning, like, why do we have these characters that we just send off into battle so that there's some kind of death toll, but we don't want to get attached to them, so we don't know their names? Like, what are they there for?
Yes. All right, the away party will consist of Mr. Data, Commander Riker, and Junior Ensign Bob. Like, go get them. I'm sure you'll be fine. And they use, like, the Star Trek uses the red shirts as a trope, as a way of just escalating the tension or demonstrating
somebody has
the danger.
To die, but it can't be one of the officers.
Exactly. Like, we have to see how dangerous it is down on the surface of this planet and how high the stakes are.
Okay, so we'll put that on our list. That's one of the plot devices that a minion solves, showing that the stakes are high.
Okay, well, then the other one, for the other side of this coin, talking specifically stuff people like Stormtroopers versus Jedi, is we have the security minion that serves, the only purpose they serve is to show the competence of the protagonist and to give us a cool visual scene of our protagonist doing what we want them to do, and that is kick butt and take names.
Yeah, so while I was researching this, I found a website entirely dedicated to giving the on-screen body count of every movie ever.
Oh, that would be... if you start listing those numbers, this is going to be terrifying how mass murdery our heroes get.
And they defy the movies that try to define their own body count when, like a character rattles it off or something like that. They have their own rules on the website. Like, it has to have been a death that occurred on screen, and it has to be relatively certain that it was an actual death. But, a movie like Rambo, where he's just infiltrating some enemy POW camp, and there's just hordes of baddies with machine guns, and like you said, they're just there to show how awesome our hero is.
Yeah. We just want to see the scene where Rambo is standing on top of, I don't know, a small hill or a pile of empty shells and just keeps firing the never needing to be reloaded M60 into guys that just can't figure out, hey, he's still shooting, maybe I should take cover. Okay,
so minions show that the stakes are high. They show that they show that the good guy is awesome. What other purposes do they serve?
I think that's it. I think their whole purpose is just to be killed. Now, as a tangential thing, I will say that in other forms of media, we have lots of minions as well. In video games, I've noticed this for a long time, and I've mentioned it before. There are 4 things that you can kill and just slaughter en masse in a video game, and there's not a single parental group or a single PETA group or whatever that's going to get on your case for killing all these things. It's robots, zombies, aliens, and Nazis. Nobody cares how many Nazis you slaughter in a video game. No one's ever going to complain about that.
Oh, okay. I'm trying to fulfill my role as your foil on this podcast, and I cannot disagree with what you just said. I'm thinking a little bit about when Wolfenstein 3D first came out and first-person shooters started to become a thing, and it was a little bit controversial. But you're right. When they first took their first fledgling step into the gory first-person shooter, and there was the first blood, as it were, in grainy, low-resolution video games, it was Nazis they were shooting.
And people complained about the gore, and people complained about the violence. But nobody complained about murdering people en masse because, those are Nazis. If my kid went out and slaughtered a bunch of Nazis after school, I'd probably be okay with it.
Okay. So But again, it still plays on those two things. It's either to show that the stakes are high, or that it's to show how awesome the hero is. And you don't.
The same kind of thing happens in video games. Like sometimes you want to play a video game, you want to feel like a superhero, and so you end up in a situation where they throw hordes of bad guys at you, and you just mow them all down. At the end of it, you just feel good. Like, yeah, take that.
It increases the stakes. I mean, when you see more minions, you're like, oh, this is serious.
The only time I've ever experienced like the opposite of what you just said, there was an old game. It was a Star Wars game where you start the game as a first-person shooter where you're just like a guy. But as the game goes on, you figure out that your character is force sensitive and you get a lightsaber and you start learning force powers. By the end of the game, you're so good at deflecting shots. And the game implements it great because you don't have to do anything. If like bullets are being fired at you, your character automatically deflects them back to their source. Mm-hmm. I remember one of the last stages of the game, you open a door into a hangar, and the hangar had to have 200 or 300 people in it, all with their guns like drawn and aimed at you.
And you're like, no problem.
My character was standing in this door, and I was like, I'm going to go get a sandwich. And he was just standing there deflecting the bullets. And I got up, left my room, got a soda, came back, and half the people were dead from deflected blaster bolts.
Awesome. Okay, so that's why audiences just let filmmakers get away with this. We don't question it. You don't have a bunch of minions show up and you don't really go in your mind like, why are those minions there? But even if you look at The Incredibles, I mean, there was, several dozen at least that we saw security guards on that island. They're all about the same height and age, it seemed. And this is like a deserted island in the middle of the ocean.
Yeah, there is
an active volcano.
This is what I'm talking about when I start getting interested in the logistics. Because not only do you have a fully trained and staffed security detail, none of which are wearing name tags and they're all wearing masks. Like, first of all, how do you get somebody to agree to wear a full face mask all the time as part of their job? Never mind. We're going too deep in that. But like, there had to be, how are they feeding them? How are they getting paid? Do these people have families? What's the rotation? Do they get benefits? What's the retirement plan like? Do they have extra
maybe
insurance?
It's like... But then there was also this aspect to that where it was supposed to be a big secret what was going on in that base. But if it's like an oil platform where every 6 weeks you rotate out the crew, it's going to be hard to keep the secret of what's going on in that active volcano island.
The OPSEC concerned with Minions is got to be so ridiculous because they have to, I don't know, like how much do you have to pay somebody to not ask any questions? It's like, here's an automatic weapon, kill anybody that comes through that door. Okay, why? Who am I shooting at? Are they good guys? Are we the baddies? Like, remember that sketch? Like, are we the bad guys? Like, at what point either you're paying these people so ludicrously that they just don't ask any questions, or they have to know enough and agree and buy into the organization's goals and things. So
yeah, because once the hero shows up, it probably becomes apparent pretty fast that they're outmatched.
Or not even that. Imagine if it's just a police raid. Imagine like somebody busts in and there's like 6 guys with FBI on the front of their uniforms.
Right? Do they start shooting at the feds?
Yeah. So either they're getting paid ludicrously to the point where they don't have to worry about like being prosecuted by the law, or they buy into the organization so much that they're willing to break the law, which then indicates that they know enough about the organization to be a threat to security if they got arrested.
Okay, that just made me realize one category of minions where we don't question that, and that is like crime movies, where you've got like your main characters are like the high up mobsters and police and stuff like that, but you've got the minions, and you kind of understand their motivation. They're criminals. They want to work their way up in the organization. They want to earn the trust of the crime lord.
The guys that they know they're the bad guys, and they accept that for whatever reason.
And they recognize that maybe taking on a little bit of personal risk will increase their standing in the organization and therefore give them power and wealth.
Theoretically, you would hope that being a criminal pays better than equivalent work on the legit side. So that's got to be a monetary motivation there.
I agree with that. I'm sure that's probably sound economic theory, that there's a premium that's paid to offset the increased risk.
Wow, man, I'm so happy that you put it that way. Like this is great economic theory coming out here. Bad at magic, top shelf, everyone.
So we don't always have unnamed minions. There are minions that I think pretty much classify as minion. So while we were discussing this, I was trying to think, what's the difference between our evil mastermind and the rank and file minions? And I think it's who has the motivation? Who is the source of the drive for the organization? Like Joker, after he robs that bank and gets all that money, he sets it on fire.
Okay, so what you're discussing is, there's different levels of the organization that we're talking about in fiction specifically. Typically, what we see on screen is we have our rank and file minions, just the cannon fodder, no names, most of the time no faces, and they just get slaughtered. We have a next level up, and that's kind of the henchman area. Think all of the named characters in the Bond films. Think number 2 from Austin Powers.
The guy with the razor top hat, or
Oddjob.
Oddjob, or the really tall guy with the Jaws.
Yeah, Jaws. There you go. Yeah. So presumably, like those are mostly combat henchmen you're talking about, and they're
they don't have a motivation other than to do what they're told.
Yes, they're still kind of rank and file, but they have some distinguishing characteristic that sets them apart. That they've earned a name tag in this organization almost, and we have to assume that's through effectiveness, because they always have that little montage where they show, like, oh, I'm gonna whip my hat and kill this statue for no reason. It's like, I'm so intimidating. It's like, well,
and nobody questioned why Jaws is good, but
of course, there's a ton of those in across all of fiction. But
one that came up. Go ahead.
I thought we were trying to define the levels. Then what you were talking about is then above the henchmen we have like the actual villains, the person that sets the vectors or the priorities and the mission, the person with the vision and the ability to create the organization or whatever they're working for to achieve the evil objectives that they have.
Yeah. You need kind of the numbers, like we said, for the peril and the awesomeness, and sometimes the body count. But then you also need like the next tier up that are like in GoldenEye, there was the one computer programmer that just wanted to show how awesome of a computer programmer he was, but he didn't really care what he was programming for. He didn't realize he was, going to detonate a nuclear weapon and like reset the world's currency. He was just, whatever, I want to be an awesome computer programmer.
Yeah, I get to do the things that I want to do working for these guys, and the feds won't let me do it.
Yeah. So one that came up in our text back and forth on this week was Arnim Zola in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. He's born in the World War II era. He's reached the peak of his brilliance and scientific powers, but he doesn't really have motivation, or he doesn't have the funding to do the kind of experiments he wants to do. But if he hangs with Red Skull, good things are coming his way.
Dr. Zola is just going where the grant money takes him. It's like wherever that funding source is, that's where he's going.
Maybe he was supposed to be like, what was the rocket scientist? Albert Einstein, kind of cross sides, but Robert Oppenheimer. No, not Robert Oppenheimer. Dang it. I can't think of the guy.
That was the rocket scientist from Nazi Germany that came over and
they invented like the V2 rocket. Yeah. Exactly, and came over and helped build NASA.
So that's another part about World War II that doesn't get talked about a lot, is the mad dash that both Russia and America went through to try to snatch up every Nazi scientist we could get our hands on. Are we going to talk about history for a second? Let's talk about history for a second.
Sure.
Like, modern science really can be defined very, very well by a lot of things that happened in World War II, specifically by German scientists. And they did a lot of terrible, horrible things. But that's because their regime that they were working for basically gave them a blank check, both fiscally and morally. And they had human test subjects and list. Hey, if you want to make some kind of destructive thing, we're going to give you the funding you need to make it. And there was a lot of scientific advances that happened under that regime. Yes, it was terrible, and people are still struggling with the moral dilemmas to this day of should we use this information that was obtained so horribly.
So one of the movies in the Marvel Cinematic Universe tried to deal with this. I don't know if you remember this, but it was in Thor Ragnarok. When Hela comes back to Asgard, she throws those blades at the ceiling and knocks down the fresco that's been replaced over the old one that showed her father being a peaceful, benevolent ruler, and it revealed their past of conquest and war and destruction that built the glory that is Asgard.
Yes. And they try to lock her and all of her soldiers and all of her minions away.
Right. Just pretend that didn't exist.
Oh, but we're done with that. Like, the whole idea was that she never got out of the conquering phase into the ruling phase like Odin did. And it's like, oh, well, you're just not growing up, so we're going to banish you forever.
Yeah. But she needed minions as well, so she went down in the basement and used the flame to wake up the zombie army.
And the big wolf, which did not get enough screen time.
Yeah. And so, you can still maintain your PG-13 rating when you're cutting the heads off of...
Nobody cares how many zombies you kill. I said that earlier.
Okay, so...
Tangent. I am willing to pay box office prices to watch Thor slaughter zombies en masse to Led Zeppelin all day. Like, the whole movie could have been that soundtrack in slow motion. It would have been great.
Yeah. I was watching Ant-Man. I also realized it has minions. There's like the crime minions. There's the fortress minions. The ants serve as minions, and that's like good guy minions. But the fact that they're ants kind of makes it not so bad when they're like getting eaten by seagulls or stepped on or like ground into engines or electrocuted or...
Yeah, isn't that funny how it changes when they name him? It's like, oh, Anthony, no! And it's like, oh, no, not Anthony. Wait, it's an ant. Why do we care?
Yeah. Because he had a saddle on.
I think we've already discussed that Ant-Man just completely starts falling apart when you start thinking about how they could have used their shrinking technology instead.
Yeah.
The ants are almost inconsequential to the fact that he can shrink and make things bigger. No. So,
okay.
One of the interesting things I think we were doing with the Minion discussion offline was we were trying to do the bad at magic thing where we put numbers and logic and graphs and charts and Venn diagrams to everything.
Yes.
All right. And so you were talking specifically.
We're trying to make a Gantt chart.
Yeah, we worked
not a Gantt chart. What's it called? The quadrant diagram.
Like a scatter plot.
Yeah.
Like we worked diligently to try to create an XY axis that we could plot the different types of minions on. And then we had a lot of interesting discussions about a potential Z axis. We're not going to start with that. We're going to start with our X and our Y, and we're going to start going through some of the most iconic minions and just throw them on this chart real quick.
Yeah, so the reason I brought this up was I remember infographic I'd seen about zombies, and it basically picked out the favorite zombie genres, and it was beautiful. It showed on one axis, the x-axis, the speed of the zombies, like how fast are they, and then on the y-axis, the intelligence of the zombies, how smart are they, and then it kind of classified them by whether they're undead, whether they're sick humans, or whether they're like I don't know, they had an alien suck on their face or whatever. So all those different kinds of things. And then the most dangerous zombies are the ones that are both fast and smart. And the least dangerous zombies are the ones that are slow and unintelligent.
Yes. Those are like the ones in Zombieland, which are just almost a game and fun to deal with.
So as we were discussing this, we're like, well, if we were going to make one of these infographics for Minions, what would our axes be?
And I think we stuck with... no, we didn't. We actually changed both of them. One of the x-axis was effectiveness, right? Was that what it was?
Yeah. Like how dangerous are they?
How good is this minion?
How good are they at whatever it is they're supposed to be doing?
And then the other axis was we decided on self-preservation, because there are minions that do display an actual urge to not die, which then changes how they behave regardless of their effectiveness. So
yeah, I'm thinking of like the aliens that were trying to get through the wall in Wakanda in Endgame.
Yes.
Or sorry, whatever the one before that was, Infinity War. Or the droids in the battle for Naboo. They're just marching in formation towards the objective.
Absolutely no self-preservation instincts whatsoever, which technically could make them more effective if they both weren't terrible. Like, all right, so let's start with those two. Let's start with the stupid battle droids, which were the worst designed robots I've ever seen.
Yes.
I feel like if the effort that it took to make 100 of those, if you made one of the ones that rolled up into a ball with shield generators and machine guns for arms, that would have been a lot more effective of an army.
Right. Okay. So they were less effective and they had no self-preservation.
Low and low. So they live solidly in the bottom of our chart here.
Now, the aliens that came from the jump ships that landed on Earth in Infinity War?
I'm going to say they had absolutely no self-preservation instinct whatsoever. We saw that. But they were quite effective in that. They were pretty effective. Yeah, yes, many of them died, but eventually they just started overwhelming the defenders. It took a literal god descending from another realm to pull Captain America out of this literal dog pile.
Yeah, and then they also had just like on the battle for Naboo, they also showed up with like bigger ships. You know, there was like grindy wheel things that would roll around the battlefield or whatever.
If those were weird.
But we also had good guy minions in that film in Infinity War, in that the Wakandan soldiers, unnamed Wakandan soldiers, were there to show us that the stakes were high and to die in battle. Not our heroes, of course.
Yes.
They had plot armor on.
Our heroes all had plot armor, yes. Many Wakandans died in that battle, but they at least had shields and weapons, so I imagine their self-preservation was a little higher. But before we get off the dogs, so the dogs are what? High effectiveness, low self-preservation.
Yes.
So they live in another quadrant of our chart.
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
They're in the high-low quadrant.
Now, one minion type that we talked extensively about, and it ranges all over the chart, is Stormtroopers. Everybody's favorite chunk of minions.
Yeah. So obviously our first exposure to Stormtroopers was in Star Wars 1977, later named A New Hope, and they are already starting to gain the reputation for being notoriously bad shots.
Oh, they were terrible. They were just terrible. There is a scene that they could not hit any of the protagonists. There was one of them ran smack into a door that was still opening at some point. There was a whole squadron of them that ran away from Han Solo, who was by himself.
So that's evidence of self-preservation. If he was just able to yell and run at them and they ran away.
That's valid. I got to give you that. So we are exposed.
Low effectiveness, medium self-preservation.
In that movie, yes. But this is something that we discovered as we continue talking about Stormtroopers. Is as we get more and more exposure to them, we see more, like there's more specialized Stormtroopers and like the snow troopers and then the speeder bike guys. And then later, I think Rogue One was an excellent movie. One of the things I like most about Rogue One is when you have protagonists that are not Jedi, that are not literal superheroes. Stormtroopers are really scary, and they're quite effective, and they were a real deterrent for the Rogue Squadron in that movie. So this opened up a whole discussion about is the effectiveness of a minion determined from, like, what perspective are you looking at it? If you're looking at it from the perspective of the protagonist, then it depends. If you're a Jedi, Stormtroopers are fodder. But if you're just some rank and file rebellion trooper, these are crack dudes in powered armor. Yeah, they're scary. Now, they did take over the Hoth base at the beginning of Empire Strikes Back.
That have better weapons than you. You know, I grew up playing the X-Wing and TIE Fighter space simulator games of the late to mid-90s. And I remember doing the entire X-Wing series where I flew all of the Rebel craft, and then doing the Empire TIE Fighter series where you fly all of the Imperial craft. And I remember being very cognizant of the differences in performance and capabilities of those different things. But in both cases, I was a minion. Like, I was in named battles from films that I'd watched my whole life, and yet I was a nameless character to the Jedi and the Sith.
Right. So, to bring it back to our scatter plot, if you are Luke Skywalker in Return of the Jedi, then Stormtroopers are low. They're idiots. They seem like they just keep coming at you. You're going to keep slicing them in half or sending their blaster bolts back at them. Why are they? But
if you're a rebel troop.
Yeah, if you're a rebel troop in Rogue Squadron or trying to hold down the Hoth base, these are scary guys. They're mediums or high mediums, depending on the circumstances.
Yeah. No, you're right. I definitely got to agree with you there.
Why do Stormtroopers wear the armor if one blaster bolt from a pistol will kill them, Ben? It makes no sense. I keep questioning, why are you wearing full body heavy armor that doesn't stop bullets?
Because it looks cool.
It does.
There's no other way to explain it.
It's undeniably cool. Forget camouflage. Forget effectiveness. We're going into battle all white, baby.
No. Then they're like, okay, all right, guys, we're about to have a battle on Hoth. Wait a minute.
Oh, hey. Dude, Bob, I got to mention, I felt like I was shot at a lot less in this engagement than I have been in others. Like, anybody else feel that way? The after action report of Stormtroopers. This is, again, what I'm talking about. I want like, okay, yes, this is stupid and it's not a real movie, but in the long tail, I want a Star Wars show, and it could be 10-minute episodes of just like the Empire's HR. Like, I want to have like a stormtrooper sitting in like an HR department filing a complaint against a Kylo Ren who threatened to force choke him or something.
Okay. I love it. This definitely, this could be a sketch on Saturday Night Live, or, a college humor short on YouTube, if it isn't already, because some of them are out there. That's, again, long tail. That's what the internet's there for.
Yeah.
Of course, it's like we talked about the Brandon Sanderson rule. A lot of these questions we're asking aren't, they aren't interesting. The minions are there. We take them for granted because they do the things we need them to do. They show that our hero is awesome. They make a situation. They raise the stakes.
Yes, and at some point we all decided as a moving-going audience that I would really like.
We're just going to give a pass.
Yeah, we're going to hand wave it, and it's gotten worse and worse over time. Like, it seems like every action movie you see now, there are dozens and dozens of guys getting cut down, coming out of nowhere. And unless you're really tuned into it, you don't even recognize it. You just accept it as a trope of an action movie. I was
flipping through channels on cable TV the other day, and Mr. and Mrs. Smith came on. That movie from, I don't know, like the early 2000s, where Brad and Angelina were at their peak as sexy stars. And they were both assassins and found out that they were married to each other, and then were ordered to kill each other. And they had this ridiculous knife fight in their living room.
Yes, that movie is good because of that scene. But I know what you're talking about. The follow-on scene where they're in, a sporting goods store?
Yeah, and there are these endless hordes of guys in black masks with machine guns.
And endless hordes is the only way to describe it. Like just the logistics of getting that many people to a sporting goods store can be a whole TV show.
Yeah, where are these guys coming from? Like, how much are they getting paid? Where did they get their training from?
Yeah, exactly. Do they go to work every day? Are they on shift work? Do they have offices and desks, or do they have like a bullpen, like a cop show, or do they just have a locker room and then just patrol the building all day?
Did the one guy turn and check his eye and be like, "Hey, where's Bob? Oh, he's on leave this week." Like,
do they even know each other's names? They don't have name tags. They all wear ski masks. This blows my mind. Why are they all wearing full face coverings? Like, I hate wearing ski mask when I'm skiing, Ben. Why would I choose to wear that in like normal weather all the time as a uniform?
So I have a question for you.
Okay.
Do war movies count?
Do war movies count as Minions? Okay. If it's a war movie like Saving Private Ryan, where we have a squad of guys assaulting a hill with 3 or 4 German troops in a machine gun nest, I'm going to say no. If it's a war movie like Rambo 3, where he by himself infiltrates some Taliban building that has hundreds of dudes and he somehow slaughters half of them on his own, then yes, those count as Minions.
Okay, so in a more realistic movie, they're not minions anymore. We know their story. They're a conscript, or they enlisted, and they have a chain of command, and they have a retirement plan, and they have, they could get disability if they get we know the answers to all these questions.
And there's some movies that go well out of their way to show that these are real people as part of this is what the toll that war really takes on real people. Saving Private Ryan is a great example where they have that guy digging his own grave and they have a huge blow up over whether or not they're going to actually kill him at the end of it.
Yeah. Wow, that just got a little deep for me because I'm watching a war movie right now. You interrupted me in the middle of it. It's Lone Survivor with Mark Wahlberg, and it's set in Afghanistan in the mid 2000s. And I hadn't seen it before, but there's, the Taliban are almost serving in fact, the movie's cheating a little bit, and I'm going to give them the movie sin for it. There are too many minions. Like, I looked at the actual accounts and stuff of how many people were there, and the actual death count of the engagement of the bad guys, its highest estimate is somewhere around 35. And while on screen our heroes are getting off glorious headshots at 700 yards, I've counted 21 guys that our protagonist has killed here. So they're cheating in the movie. It really should have been probably closer to single digits, but what can you do?
Well, it's not interesting to see guys trading shots of opportunity from cover and not ever hitting anything, because that's how real combat usually boils down to.
Right, exactly. You're just shooting off in the direction to keep their head behind things you can try to get away or make it.
Or maneuver or flank or whatever it is that the Army guys do so well.
Yeah, but in this, it's pop up over a rock and get 2 headshots.
Because they're serving the purpose of demonstrating the awesomeness of the protagonist.
And because there's just so many endless minions, they eventually get overwhelmed and fail.
Oh, sad movie for Mark Wahlberg.
But because it's based on real life, they can't get away from some of the realities of what actually happened. Like, for instance, they sent in a couple of Chinook helicopters without adequate air support. They didn't have some Apaches there, and the Chinook took a rocket-propelled grenade and went down and killed everyone on board.
That's another movie trope. Like, helicopters can get shot down by just AK-47s. Like, helicopters are very delicate and intricate machines. It doesn't take an RPG to take them out of the sky.
Yeah. Well, and it probably wasn't as dramatic as they showed it in the movie, but yeah. Okay, so war movies... the people in war movies are not minions if they are if the war movie is more realistic, and if it's less realistic, then they cross over from being enlisted troops in a battle to being whatever this fictional plot device is that makes our hero look awesome.
I want to see that in a normal action movie, like where you have the protagonist going through the corporate security minions that you see all the time. I want them to jump cut to one of the minions on the ground, like holding in his guts on the side of his thing, pulling a letter out of his vest, handing it to one of the other nameless minions, like, tell Betty that I'll miss her, or just some humanizing moment. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I didn't know where you were going with that, but the image of imagining like the dramatic scene of someone dying in a war movie set in like some corporate security guard is really kind of a funny juxtaposition. Well done.
Well, this the thing, like that they would never happen, because then it's like it would immediately suspend the disbelief and be like, oh crap, these are real people that our protagonist is just butchering.
Yeah, so there's one convention of these that's we've also taken for granted, and that is that the protagonist only has to punch minions the exact amount of time that they need to in order for them to be unconscious so that they can keep moving, and then they will never again regain consciousness on camera.
They will never be a problem again. They will never like call in for backup or start like reporting positions of the enemy. Yeah, at no point will they contribute to the downfall of the protagonist ever again.
I'm imagining Iron Man 1 when Natalie's going down the hallway spinning around everyone's necks and and stuff like that. And then Happy punches out the one guy and he's like, I did it. And he turns and looks down the hallway and there's like 14 guys all just like laid out. That's all they were there for, was to show that she's awesome. None of them are supposed to wake up or present any additional problem for the rest of the movie.
This is something that show Archer does really well, is whenever any of the characters gets knocked unconscious, which happens all the time, they're always very cognizant of, oh man, are you okay? Like being knocked unconscious is super bad for you. It's like, yep, I got a CAT scan on Monday. And like they take it very seriously.
I love it. All right, there's one other kind of minion we need to talk about, and that's the little yellow guys.
The actual minions?
Yeah. Like, what are they? Is it a parody of the idea of minions in film?
So I think in the original film, they just needed generic disposable comic reliefs. And like they get experimented on and they die horribly. And it's just funny because they're not people, they're minions. And that's kind of the key point here, is that they're not people.
I wonder if they planned it to just be like a traditional kind of trope, and they had them be more like black guys in black uniforms and masks, and they needed something to be a bit more comic reliefy and make it feel less perilous. And so they transitioned these cartoony, silly...
They also fill a lot of little plot holes. At one point, Gru is infiltrating some building, and he's in a dark room, and he takes one and he shakes it, and then he like cracks its back, and it starts glowing like a glow stick. Another point, he's using one like a bungee cord because it's like holding onto it and it is stretching as he goes like down an air vent.
I like the fact that they use the little yellow guys to try to fill in the fact that like we never wonder about what are these guys' motivation, but the little yellow guys kind of have this vague drive to help do evil things.
Have you seen the Minions movie?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that's the idea.
They want to achieve evil goals, but not really. Just like silly evil goals. Not like they don't want to do genocide. They just want to take the moon.
Imagine, Hitler with a group of tiny yellow minions. Now hang on a second. I think maybe they would have worked for Hitler because there's some scenes in the original Minions where they all have automatic weapons and chainsaws and like they're like then yelling like, yes, let's go on a killing rampage. I think they toned them down in later movies when the yellow Minions turned out to be the runaway hit and not the rest of the characters in the movie. But I see what you're going for. I think Minions would have worked for Hitler.
Should we stop there?
That's it. That is the conclusion of this entire discussion. The little yellow Minions that worked for Gru would have been like the frontline shock troops in World War II.
Wow. Speechless. All right, there's two things I wanted to talk about to close up the podcast. There's two opportunities I want to give our audience to interact with the show. One of them is a giveaway I'd like to give to the audience, and the other is just help us with some content we're going to do. So when we record in 2 weeks, which will be on the
12th, December 12th.
12th, yeah. No. What I want to target is for the 26th, the show after that.
Okay.
I want to do the full Bad at Magic treatment of evaluating the magic systems of your favorite Christmas movies. So what I'm going to do is I'll go on the subreddit and I'll open up a subreddit for list your favorite Christmas movies here for us. And then you and I, when we record on the 26th of December, we will evaluate the use of magic in those Christmas movies.
That's outstanding. I can already think of two that I want to put on the list.
Okay, me too. So that gives us time to watch them and evaluate them and come up with our criteria and those kinds of things. And we will discuss those and record those 2 podcasts from now, which I guess would be episode 36. That's one. The second one is I broke down this week and did something I've been meaning to do for a long time. And I bought a masterclass subscription. And some kind of holiday promotion the masterclass company is doing is that when you buy a subscription, then they give you a code for a second subscription to give away for free to a friend. And I would like to offer that masterclass subscription. It's a 1-year subscription, probably worth about $100 for you to be able to go on unlimited access to all of their awesome content on their website, to have Steve Martin teach you how to be a comedian, or Gordon Ramsay teach you how to be a cook, or who are some of the other people? There's famous dancers and singers and anything you can imagine. So if you want to learn something new. So Josh and I talked about this, and I think how I want to do this is I'm not going to give you very much time. So this will only be to our avid listeners who listen within a short amount of time from when this comes out. So I'm guessing this podcast will go live on probably maybe the 30th of November, the 1st of December, and I'm going to give you 10 days till the 11th of December. When this podcast goes live on the 11th of December, what was it we decided we were going to have them do?
Bad at parenting.
Ah, yes. Okay, so I'm going to set up a separate thread for this on the subreddit, and I'm inviting you to share your best Bad at Parenting story, and the winner we will share on the podcast, and I will send you the code for the free masterclass subscription.
All right, to summarize, the TLDR of all that is you have until December 25th, until Christmas Day, to put your suggestions for Ben and I to go watch a Christmas movie, because we are going to rate the magic used in Christmas movies. By December 11th, you have an opportunity of submitting a bit for Bad at Parenting, your best Bad at Parenting story, and teenagers or people that don't have any children, you have parents, so you have Bad at Parenting stories too. Submit those to the Reddit by December 11th, and the one that we find the most amusing we will share on the podcast with permission, and that person will win a 1-year subscription to Masterclass.
And that's it. So that's a way of saying, one, inviting you to participate in the show, because we like that you're out there and we want to interact with you. And we also want to give back and share with you something. So if you find what we do enjoyable, share it with a friend. And thanks for listening.